Good afternoon. Nice to see you again. Those of you who were with us just a short time ago when we did our annual reading of the book of Esther for Purim, that post remains on the YouTube and Facebook pages. Now, special time because we won't be available tonight when we're going to be at the Purim Suda, the special meal of the Purim holiday. So we're doing AT Daily right now. Let's light up the darkness. Okay, which looks like it's going to be an intimate group. Everybody's partying. Gordo in Scotland again. Great to see you, Gordo, as always. Bill in Mid-Missouri and Guy. Thomas in Ohio. Mr. Reliable. You are Mr. Reliables. All of you are Mr. Reliables. And Abba Steinheiser. Hi from Brooklyn. That's a new name. Welcome, Abba. Great to have you with us. Excuse me, over there on the YouTube side, the most reliable. Ella in the house, Elon Neat, and Marjorie, welcome back. Always great to see your names. Joseph in Massachusetts, Renee in Indiana. I love you guys. I can't wait to meet you all in person. We thought about it. We're going to do it at some point. We're going to have some kind of an accidental Talmudist, Shabbaton, a weekend. We'll get together for some beautiful learning and sharing Shabbos together, maybe in the middle of the country somewhere. We got to do that. So we'll make that happen. We don't have a firm plan yet. We got to get through the movie and everything we're doing right now. But that's something we definitely have in the back of our minds for the future. Shandora in the Bronx, welcome. Renee likes that idea. Outstanding. Joe in the Inland Empire, welcome back, Joe. Okay, our daf today, and it's really quite a short one, which is good for the festivities today. By the way, today, before we did the reading of the book of Esther, I was in a hurry because I had to visit my friend who was having a little Purim party. He was making a siyum that he makes every year on Purim. And he's a family guy. His kids have lots of friends. It was a beautiful little party. Lots of people coming together and enjoying Purim together, many in costume. Such a festive, joyous atmosphere. I just stayed for a short time, wished him a l'chaim, and was on my way back so that I could do the reading of the book of Esther. And the neighbor, some crazy lady, I guess somebody had parked in her driveway or blocked her driveway, which I can understand would be frustrating. But with lots of children milling around outside, this lady was yelling at someone at the top of her lungs, cursing. I'm like walking by, staring at her, horrified. And she says, what's the effing matter with you? Screamed at me and cursed at me, someone she'd never seen before in her life. It was just stunning, and I was so stunned I just laughed. I couldn't help but laugh at this person. But, the story of Purim and this idea of irrational Jew hatred against us, it's just never far away, as we've all seen, since October 7th. And so, thank God, we're all pulling together here. We're all in the same boat, right? Pulling in the same direction. Jews and non-Jews, together in this learning community. As Nina said earlier, our allies at this time, we appreciate you so much. Thank God you're here. Thank you, my holy sisters and brothers. And the Jews, all of us pulling together, learning together, could not be more important at any time in history. This lady was clearly, beyond rational. It wasn't just the car in the driveway. She was screaming at people because, Jews having a good time. How offensive. Anyway. Okay, our Mishnah today is Mishnah number 2. Here, we're starting with Mishnah number 2 here in chapter 2 of Tractate Bava Metzia, the 22nd volume of the Talmud. We've been discussing the laws of lost and found objects, and this continues with Mishnah number 2. And we're going to have a beautiful spiritual teaching that's going to come out of these very practical laws, as you shall see. Mishnah number 2, chapter 2. And for these items which one finds, one is obligated to proclaim his find, meaning it's not finders keepers. You have to announce that you found something. You say something general, and then hopefully the owner will come forward and be able to identify, tell you something about what he lost so that you'll know, obviously that's the owner, so you can return it to him. And you have to demand that they, identify it properly, lest you give it to somebody who's taking advantage of the fact that somebody proclaimed the finding of lost objects to steal it, take it for himself. So they have to identify, give you some kind of identification of what it is that you found that they claim they lost, right? So what is it that distinguishes, the first Mishnah, we learned things that you're allowed to keep. Basically because there were either no distinguishing marks on those found objects or because they were lost in such a way that the owners would have had to have despaired of ever recovering them, and that rendered those objects ownerless. Here, objects that are found under circumstances where we know that the owner would not have despaired of recovering them, and so the finder must proclaim what he found, and hopefully the owner will step forward. So these are the found items that one is obligated to proclaim. If one found produce inside a vessel, or a vessel by itself, right? Because the box, the basket, the bag, those things are identifiable as belonging to the owner. Coins that are inside a pouch, or the pouch by itself. Piles of produce, piles of coins, 3 coins that are stacked one atop another, bundles of grain in a secluded area, loaves of a homeowner, as each shapes his loaves in his own unique manner, fleeces of wool fleeces that are taken from the house of a craftsman, as each craftsman processes the wool in his own unique manner, jugs of wine or jugs of oil. If one finds any of these, he is obligated to proclaim his find. That's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara. And the Gemara infers from this Mishnah that the reason one is obligated to proclaim his find is that he found produce inside the vessel or coins inside the pouch. But if he found a vessel and produce was next to it, or if he found a pouch and coins were on the ground next to it, well, the produce and the coins belong to the finder, whereas the vessel or the pouch he would proclaim. And the Gemara comments, we learn from this Mishnah by inference that which the sages taught explicitly in a Baraisa. If one found a vessel and produce was next to it, or if he found a pouch and coins were next to it, the produce and the coins, belong to him, the finder. And if some of the produce is in the vessel, or if some of the produce is in the vessel and some of the produce is on the ground, or if some of the coins are inside the pouch and some of them are on the ground, then one is obligated to proclaim his find. So in other words, if you found a few scattered coins and a pouch nearby, you don't have to assume that the coins fell out of the pouch. But if the coins some of them were in the pouch, some of them outside the pouch, and then it looked like the pouch spilled and some coins came out of it, okay, then you assume that the whole thing was lost by somebody who will be able to identify it, and you proclaim the find. But if the coins were simply scattered and the pouch was nearby, there's no reason to assume that the coins belong to that pouch. So you would announce the finding of the pouch, but not of the coins. And likewise for produce and the vessel. Now the Gemara raises a contradiction from another Baraisa. If one found an item on which there is no distinguishing mark alongside an item on which there is a distinguishing mark, then he is obligated to proclaim that he found both. So what difference does it make whether some of the coins are in the pouch or not? If you find a pouch and coins nearby, you should assume that the coins were inside the pouch and you proclaim both of them. So why is it that in one Mishnah it says you proclaim that you found both of them, and in the other you say, well, you proclaim for the pouch, but you can keep the coins? This seems like a contradiction. So what's going on? this is the contradiction. If the owner of the item with the distinguishing mark came and took his item but did not claim ownership of the other item, then the other person who found the items acquires the item on which there is no distinguishing mark. So this law should also apply when one finds a vessel on which there is a distinguishing mark and produce on which there is no distinguishing mark. So that's the contradiction. So now the Gemara cites several possible resolutions to this contradiction. Rav Zevid said, not difficult, la kasha. This baraisa, where the finder is obligated to proclaim his finding of both the vessel and the produce, this is referring to a container and flax. Since the flax fibers are intertwined, when part of the flax falls out of the container, all of the flax would fall out. Therefore, the fact that the flax is completely outside the container is not an indication that it was never in the container. That Mishna, from which it is inferred that the produce found outside the vessel belongs to the finder, is referring to a basket and produce. Had the produce fallen out of the basket, presumably some produce would remain in the basket, because the individual units of produce are not connected to each other. Therefore, the fact that no produce was found in the basket indicates that this produce did not fall out of this basket. They were simply found in the same area, but we have no reason to assume that the produce was in the basket. Rav Papa said both this ruling and that ruling are referring to a basket and produce, and still it is not difficult. This baraisa, where the finder is obligated to proclaim his finding of the produce found outside the empty vessel, is referring to a case where some produce remains in the basket, and that Mishnah, from which it is inferred that the produce found outside the vessel belongs to the finder, is referring to a case where no produce remains in the basket. And if you wish, say instead, both this ruling and that ruling are referring to a case where no produce remains in the basket, and nevertheless it is not difficult. This baraisa, where the finder is obligated to proclaim his finding of the produce found outside the empty vessel, is referring to a case where the mouth of the basket is facing the produce, indicating that the produce fell from it. And that Mishnah, from which it is inferred that the produce found outside the vessel belongs to the finder, is referring to a case where the mouth of the basket is not facing the produce. Right? So, in other words, we take in the totality of the find. Does it look like the produce spilled out of the basket? Okay, so then even if there's no produce in the basket, if a reasonable person would look at this and say, that looks like it fell out of the basket, so you proclaim both the basket and the produce. But if you could reasonably say, somebody dropped some produce, somebody else dropped the basket, the produce has no distinguishing mark, it's just some produce on the ground, so you have to proclaim finding the basket, but you can keep the produce. Now, if when the person comes forward and says, yeah, that's my basket, and there was a bunch of produce with it, did you happen to find that? So it's actually going beyond the letter of the law, but obviously it's praiseworthy, and the Rima, I believe, would say even you're obligated to at that point say, oh yeah, I did find that produce, and here's your produce as well. But you only have to announce the basket. And if you wish, say instead, both this ruling and that ruling are referring to a case where the mouth of the basket is facing the produce, and still it is not difficult. That Mishnah, from which is inferred that produce found outside the vessel belongs to the finder, is referring to a case where the empty basket has a rim. Had the produce falling out of the basket, the rim would have prevented some of the produce from falling. You would expect some residue in the basket. If there is none, then this produce did not come from that basket. And this baraisa, where the finder is obligated to proclaim the produce found outside the empty vessel, is referring to a case where the basket has no rim, and therefore the produce in its entirety could have fallen from the basket, leaving behind no residue. Now, our Mishnah taught, and for these found items, one is obligated to proclaim his find, piles of produce and piles of coins. So if it's piled up in a way that indicates that it was purposely piled, so that it wasn't that it fell off somebody's shoulder and he wasn't aware of it until it was too late and he would have despaired of recovering it. Rather, somebody piled it there intending to come back. That's why if you find that, you proclaim your find and give the owner a chance to recover it. Conclude from it that number is a distinguishing mark, and one reclaims his produce or his coins by correctly declaring the number of piles. And the Gemara rejects this proof. Perhaps one should teach that the Mishnah is stating a pile of produce. It is not the number of piles, but their location that serves as a determining mark. Where was it piled? Based on that emendation, conclude from it that location is a distinguishing mark, but the Gemara rejects this proof as well. Perhaps one should teach the Mishnah as stating piles of produce, not a pile. Since the authoritative version of the Mishnah is unclear, no proof can be cited from it. So if you find piles, right, it looks like it was purposely piled that way, you proclaim it and give a person a chance to identify it, but it's unclear what it is that they identify, where they left the pile or how many piles they left, but give them a chance to identify. Now, the Mishnah teaches, and for these found items, one is obligated to proclaim as find, right? Not finders keepers. You have to announce that you found 3 coins stacked one atop another, right? Because if it fell out of somebody's pocket, if it fell out of somebody's bag, would they be in a nice pile together? No. When you see 3 coins stacked neatly, you know that a person stacked them like that in that location. So there's no reason to assume that they despaired of recovering them. They, for some reason, stacked the coins that way. So if you find them, you're going to safeguard them and proclaim that you found them. And then these people, somebody can step forward and say, yes, at such and such a location, I stacked 3 coins. Ah, it's yours. Here are your coins. I'm going to say more about that in a second, but let me finish this sugya. 3 coins stacked one atop another. So Rabbi Yitzhak from Migdal says, and one is obligated to proclaim the find in a case where the coins are arranged in well-ordered towers. And this is also taught in a Baraisa. If one found scattered coins, these belong to him. If the coins are arranged in well-ordered towers, he is obligated to proclaim his find. And the Baraisa elaborates, and these coins are considered to be arranged in towers. 3 coins stacked one atop another. 1, 2, 3. Or, well, as we will see, let me just keep reading, then I'll come back to this idea. The Gemara notes an apparent contradiction in the Baraisa. This Baraisa itself is difficult, meaning self-contradictory. In the first clause of the Baraisa, you said, if one found scattered coins, well, these belong to him. From which it can be inferred that if the coins partially overlap, that he is obligated to proclaim his find. Say that the latter clause of the Baraisa, if the coins are arranged in well-ordered towers, he is obligated to proclaim his find. From which it can be inferred that if the coins partially overlap, these belong to him. And the Gemara answers, the Tana of the Baraisa calls any pile of coins that is not arranged in well-ordered towers scattered. Meaning the coins might overlap a little bit, but if it just looks like coins that fell on the ground, okay, you can keep that because no distinguishing feature. But if they're neatly stacked, then you have to proclaim the find because obviously someone left them there in that manner. And Rabbi Hanina says the sages taught that one must proclaim his find only when he finds coins minted by 3 different kings. But if all the coins were minted by 1 king, one is not obligated to proclaim his find. And the Gemara says, what are the circumstances? If the coins are arranged in well-ordered towers, then even if all the coins were minted by 1 king, the finder should also be obligated to proclaim his find. And if the coins are not arranged in well-ordered towers, then even if the coins were minted by 3 kings, the finder should also not be obligated to proclaim his find. So rather, if Rabbi Hanina's ruling was stated, this is how it was stated, right? The Gemara has so far, brought down that ruling of Rabbi Hanina improperly. So this is the way it should be stated. The sages taught that one must proclaim his find only when he finds coins of different sizes minted by 1 king, which are similar to coins minted by 3 kings. But if they are coins of the same size minted by 1 king, he is not obligated to proclaim his find. And the Gemara explains, according to this interpretation, what are the circumstances of coins that are arranged in well-ordered towers and which one must proclaim? It is when the bottom coin is the widest and the intermediate sized coin is atop it, and the smallest coin is atop the intermediate one, meaning like a nice little, conical tower, as if, again, somebody arranged them very purposely. And this is, as we say, they were placed there and are not lost at all. But if one finds coins minted by one king, each of them sized like the other, even if it is placed upon the other, those coins belong to the finder. And the reason is that it is possible to say that by chance they fell together so that their arrangement is not a distinguishing mark. And Rabbi Yochanan says, even if the coins were minted by one king, one is also obligated to proclaim his find. And the Gemara asks, what does one proclaim in order to invite the owner to describe his item? And the Gemara answers, he proclaims that he found coins. And the owner comes and specifies the number of coins. So the Gemara asks, if so, why does the Mishnah specifically teach a case where one found 3 coins, when even if one found 2 coins, they could be identified by their number? And Ravina said, well, the finder proclaimed that he found coins, plural. So obviously there's 2 or more. You can't say that you've already said that there's 2 or more. If the guy comes and says that, well, there were 2, well, he knew that from the nature of the announcement. So it's going to be the number. And obviously 3, it would be better if there was 46. And the guy comes and says, I have 46 coins. Then there are his coins. Rabbi Yirmiyah raises a dilemma. If one found coins configured like a round bracelet, so here's the ground, tilt it up so I can talk to you. Okay. Boom, 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 boom. So if you found the coins arranged like that, okay, somebody arranged them, right? Very different. It's my little eraser here. Right? Very different than that. That's random. Those fell and somebody, lost those and despaired of recovering them. On the other hand, if you found them in a straight line, right? Then somebody arranged them. They didn't lose them. They didn't abandon them. They stacked them there, intending to come back, and they could identify them. And that's why it's not finders keepers, and you have to proclaim the find, and hopefully the owner will come forward and take them. And likewise, if they were arranged in a triangle. Now, this is all very reminiscent for me, and I'm sure for Nina, of what our friend Zipporah says as a proof that God created the universe, and that God exists, and that God is supervising all that is going on in the world, even though God hides, just as we've learned today in the story of the Megillah, the book of Esther, that we celebrate on Purim, right, where God is never mentioned, but all the events are so many crazy coincidences that clearly God was orchestrating those events. That's what God is always doing. God is speaking to us in the language of events if we would but listen. And the example that Zipporah likes to say is, if you were driving through the desert and everything is bleak and barren, and seemingly looks like the landscape of Mars, and just rocks and boulders and tumbleweeds scattered everywhere, and then you found 10 rocks lined up in a perfect straight line. Well, you would know that that was not a random accident of nature. There's 10 rocks in a straight line. Somebody came and arranged those rocks in a straight line, just like somebody came and stacked those coins like a triangle, or somebody came and stacked those coins in a perfectly straight tower or in a straight line, etc. Somebody did that. There was intentionality. Right? If so, for a line of rocks in the desert, how much more for a universe of such magnificent grandeur? Stars and planets and suns and, atmospheres and biology and thinking sentient creatures that emerge, and just all of the beauty of the universe, what we know of it and what we suspect of it, testifies that it was arranged, it was wanted. This is all evidence that God created the world. A universe could not come into being randomly for no reason. Think about it. It's ridiculous. It always seemed ridiculous to me instinctively that there was nothing. And then there was a universe worth of galaxies, suns, and solar systems, and beautiful flowers, on the planet, in that solar system, in that galaxy, in that universe. Of course, somebody came along and arranged that, and that was the Holy One, blessed be He. And likewise, we see here with coins, if they're arranged that somebody showed intentionality, then you can't assume that it happened randomly. Somebody left them there on purpose. And if you find them, you safeguard them and proclaim your find and give that owner a chance to reclaim them. The Gemara suggests, resolve at least one of these dilemmas about the straight line, the triangle, the ladder. Rav Nachman says that Rabba bar Avu says for any arrangement of coins, such that if one were to introduce a wood chip between the coins, he would thereby lift them all at once with that wood chip. He is obligated to proclaim his find. Based on that criterion, one can conclude that if one finds coins configured like a ladder, he is obligated to proclaim his find. So this arrangement like a ladder means, like, let's say that all the coins are the same. Not only are they in a straight line, but whatever is minted on them is all arranged. So imagine heads, right? So imagine you have 10 pennies, right? And they're all heads. And not only are they all heads, but the heads are all facing, let's say north-south. So that just couldn't have happened randomly. Even if they're not arranged in a straight line, what the figure on them is the same head on every coin facing up and in a north-south orientation. It's not random, so somebody arranged them, so you have to proclaim your find. Rav Ashi raises a dilemma. Now we're on page 25b. If the coins were configured like the stones of the house of worship dedicated to the Roman deity Mercury, then what is the law? And the note explains that this was completely idolatry, but it's interesting that they were using this simply as an example, that the way that Roman idolaters would show, their obeisance and worship of this, idolatrous god of Mercury, is that there were sort of roadside stands dedicated to Mercury. And when people would pass by, they would take 3 stones and put, 2 here and the third one on top, making a little vertical triangle. Again, that would show that somebody walked by and did that. It wouldn't happen randomly because the wind was blowing. And that's how they showed that. And so in other words, if you found coins arranged in this manner, it shows that it wasn't random, so presumably you would proclaim the find, even though it's only 3 coins in this little stack. So the Gemara suggests, come in here a resolution of the dilemma, as it is taught in Baraisa, if one found scattered coins, these belong to him. If they were configured like the stones of the house of worship dedicated to Mercury, he is obligated to proclaim his find. And the Gemara explains, and these are coins that were configured like the stones of the house of worship dedicated to Mercury. One was situated here, and one was situated to the side, and one was on top of the 2, as I explained. And the sage is taught in a Baraisa in the case of one who finds a Sela coin in the marketplace, and another person finds him and says, it is mine. And the distinguishing mark is that it is new, or that the coin is minted by the Emperor Nero, or that it is minted by King so-and-so. Well, he has said nothing at all. And the finder need not give him the seller. That's not enough of a distinguishing mark. It's like saying, did you find $1? Well, I lost $1. It was green. You haven't said anything. Moreover, even if this person's name is written on the seller, if you say, did you find $1? Yeah. Well, my name is Joe Schmo, and that's written on the dollar. And you look at the dollar, it's like, oh, well, it does say Joe Schmo on the dollar. This is actually a con that was featured in the movie Paper Moon, right, with Ryan and Tatum O'Neal, where they wrote something on the money and then spent it, right, in a store, and then later came and said, no, that you have my money, and there it's written, but it was a scam, right? And the same thing they could have done. wrote the name on it, then spent it, and then later come along and said, you have my money, my name is on it. Okay, and that concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 2. Now, Mishnah number 3. Here in chapter 2. If one found behind a wooden fence or behind a stone fence bound fledglings, these are young birds, or if he found them in the paths that run through fields, he may not touch them. Forget you can't find them and keep them. You don't even find them and proclaim them, because then if no one comes forward, you'll end up keeping them. Rather, you may not even touch them at all. You just let them be. As they were certainly placed there intentionally. In a case where one found a vessel, a container, in a garbage dump, if it is concealed, he may not touch it, as a person certainly came and concealed it there. If it is exposed, then the finder takes the item and proclaims his fine. That's surprising, right? If it's in a garbage dump, then don't we just assume that somebody abandoned it, right? They threw it away. They made it ownerless. You can take stuff that's garbage. That's okay. But what we're talking about here is somebody who might have been using the garbage dump as a place to hide things. So if it was hidden, then for sure that's what he did. If it was sort of partially hidden, then he might have done that, he might not. So before you take it and keep it for yourself, you proclaim the fine. That's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara, what is the reason that one may not touch the fledglings? And the Gemara answers, the reason is that we say with regard to these birds, a person concealed them. And if one takes them, their owner has no distinguishing mark on them that would enable him to reclaim them. Therefore, let the finder leave the birds in place until their owner comes and takes them. Right? This is like a dog that's tied with a rope to a fence. Right? Somebody tied him there. So you don't come along and take the dog. Because if you take the dog, I mean, the owner could say, I left it tied to a fence in such and such a place. But this is a dog without a collar, and there's no other distinguishing mark than the location where it was found. And, you know, for obvious reasons, if somebody tied a dog to a fence, you don't come along and take the dog. Right? The dog was starving, and clearly he was abandoned there, and there's a huge problem. That would be a different story. The Gemara asks, but why? Let the knot binding the fledglings serve as their distinguishing mark. And Rabbi Abba Bar Zavta said that Rav said this is a case where the birds were bound at their wings. Since everyone binds them in that manner, the knot binding the birds is not a distinguishing mark. And the Gemara asks, and let their location serve as their distinguishing mark. And Rav Ukva Bar Chama said this is a case where the birds hop and do not remain in place. The dog wasn't tied to a fence. It was tied to another dog, and the dogs were wandering around. Now not so simple, right? And especially so with birds, which are not pets like the way dogs would be. Fledglings, I mean, we're talking about like chicks that you would buy, you know, to bring home, raise as chickens and then eat them or keep them for the eggs. But there's, you know, thousands of them all over the place. So hard to say that there's a distinguishing mark. If they're simply bound in this way, there would need to be more. And since there's not, you leave them where they are because the owner left them in that spot for a reason. And the Gemara answers, it can be said that the birds came from elsewhere, and it can be said that a person concealed them, and the result is uncertainty, suffix, doubt. With regard to whether the placement of the birds was deliberate, i.e. whether or not they are lost items. And Rabbi Abba Bar Zavta says that Rav says, in any case of uncertainty as to whether the placement of an item was deliberate, we may not take it, lechithala, right? Meaning ab initio. Lechatchila. We may not take them ab initio, but if he did take it, he need not return it, right? So in a case of doubt, you should leave it alone. If you didn't really think it through and you took it, okay, there's enough room for, you know, to think that it might have been lost and you can keep it, but you should proclaim the fine. Now, the Mishnah teaches in a case where one found a vessel in a garbage dump, again, in such a way that somebody hid it there, not threw it away. So if it is concealed, you may not even touch it, as a person certainly concealed it there. And if it is exposed, which I think means partially unconcealed, the finder takes the item and proclaims his fine. So the Gemara raises a contradiction from a baraisa. If one found a vessel concealed in a garbage dump, the finder takes the item and proclaims his find because it is routine for a garbage dump to be cleared. And therefore, presumably, it was not placed there. Rather, it is a lost item and one is obligated to proclaim his find. And Rav Zeved said, this is not difficult. La kasha. This Mishnah is referring to containers or cups, and that baraisa is referring to knives or a fork. And the Gemara explains, in the case of containers or cups which are large, it is inconceivable that they fell there inadvertently, so he should not touch them. In a case of knives or forks which are small, there is room for uncertainty as to whether they were placed there or whether they fell, so the finder takes them and proclaims his find, so the owner has a chance to come forward. Rav Papa said, both this baraisa and that Mishnah referring to containers and cups, and nevertheless it is still not difficult. Here the baraisa is referring to a garbage dump that is designed to be cleared, and therefore he must take the vessel and proclaim his find to prevent it from being cleared with the garbage. And there the Mishnah is referring to a garbage dump that is not designated to be cleared, as it is possible that the owner placed it there, the finder may not touch it. These garbage dumps that we're talking about, it's not the municipal dump. It's not the town dump where garbage just goes. It's more like a messy yard where somebody just puts garbage, meaning later to come and, once there's enough garbage there, he'll take it to the town dump. So that's why it's unclear whether he was hiding stuff there or whether he's throwing it away or whether, he just dropped it there and it's actually a lost item that he's looking for. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. The Gemara asks, how could one be obligated to proclaim his find of a vessel in a garbage dump that is designed to be cleared? Even if the owner of the vessel concealed it there, it is a deliberate loss, and the owner renounced ownership of the vessel when he threw it out. And the Gemara answers, rather, the baraisa is referring to a garbage dump that is not designed to be cleared, and the owner of the land reconsidered and then decided to clear it. So the Gemara asks, granted, according to Rav Papa, this is the reason that the Tana teaches in the baraisa, he takes it and proclaims his find, because it is routine for a garbage dump to be cleared, as the ruling is dependent on whether the dump is ultimately cleared or not. But according to Rav Zeved, the reason for the ruling in the baraisa is that the utensils found were small, knives and forks. And what is the relevance of the statement in the baraisa, because it is routine for the garbage dump to be cleared? And the Gemara explains that according to Rav Zeved, it means because it is routine for a garbage dump to inadvertently have small utensils cleared, i.e. that they were inadvertently discarded into it and that they would then be lost if the finder didn't proclaim the find. That concludes our discussion of Mishnah number 3 here in chapter 2. And tomorrow, God willing, at 7 p.m., and it's going to be 7 p.m. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, because I'm working, at the post-production house on our movie doing color. So this whole week, so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we're going to be going 1 hour later than normal. I'll put an announcement on the Facebook page. But just like we did on Wednesday and Thursday last week, this week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 7 p.m. Okay, take a few questions. Ilanit. I had to cancel my first Purim Suda in Maryland due to illness. Still got to complete all the mitzvahs with the help of my wonderful new community. And my private Suda, my private meal, right, Purim meal, which is a mitzvah, is featuring homemade chicken soup dropped off in my gifts of food from dear friends. Beautiful story to share with us. Ilanit, may you have a refuah shlema, a complete healing of body, mind, and spirit. And we say amen. Tom, what if more than one person finds a purse or a basket or a pile? Who proclaims and who gets to keep the whatever? What if you proclaim, but by the time you return to the spot, someone else has removed it? When you proclaim, it means you took it. Right? You took it and then proclaim the find. And then someone will come forward to you and give the identifying, the distinguishing mark, and then you will give it to that person. But proclaim the find means you found it and took it. If multiple people find the thing at the same time, then we're back at our first Mishnah in chapter 1, right? 2 people come to the courthouse holding the thing that they found, and who gets to keep it in the event that no actual owner comes forward. Joseph, could the common person simply label his belongings so as to avoid this whole mess? Of course, that's a distinguishing mark. Because even if one were to testify that the item belongs to him, he could still lie about it and steal another person's goods. I think we may have gone over that too. But I mean, one who is lying, saying that it's his, he's not proclaiming the find, right? If he's that dishonest, why would he proclaim and then say it was actually his? That's someone who just took it, right? And who didn't proclaim, who didn't do the mitzvah returning the lost object. But in terms of labeling your objects, 100%. And as a golfer, I'll say one an excellent thing, best way to spend $5 or $10, whatever it is you can go to Amazon, and obviously it's not just for golfers. You can go to Amazon and they make little sticker labels. You get like, 30 or 40 of them with your name and phone number or email, or whatever you want to put on it. And yeah, put those stickers on all your stuff that are, that you might end up losing or leaving behind somewhere. And you're so much more likely to get them back. Just, go to Amazon and search for, name labels, stickers, something like that. And you'll find it right away. That's what I've got for us today. And with God's help, we'll be together again tomorrow, Monday, at 1 hour later than normal at 7 p.m. Pacific. That's going to be the time this week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. All the best. Freilich and Purim, Chag Purim Sameach. May we all be blessed with an uplifting, joyous Purim